So my philosophy with setting chains is that every plugin has to have a specific role that works in harmony with the rest of the chain, not spending your time kind of using one plugin to back out of other plugins, which I feel the Quicksand chains often do. Okay, hey everybody. Today's quick tip is going to be how to avoid plugin quicksand. I am fortunate enough to get sent a lot of songs to mix, and I put together a chain that I feel kind of emulates a lot of what people send me when they're trying to do a quick vocal process, or even some of the stuff that I see online. Now, it's not exact because I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but this is a general kind of guideline of what I'm seeing. So I'm going to hit play first. We're to hear that vocal against a track.
In my imagination, the sky still swells with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other.
I am going to set up a vocal chain that I feel is your can't miss vocal processing for whether you are trying to get a track up and running really fast in a recording sense, or if you were trying to get something to sit nice and stable in the mix. And then we will compare the two, and I'll give you my thoughts on the Quicksand. Let's start the clock. I am going to use only stock plugins. First and foremost, what do we want to do? We want that vocal to feel very natural. We want it to sit nice and stable in the mix, and we don't want to have any particular part of the articulation overemphasized or actually feeling too crushed. I start with a de-esser. De-essing or any sibilance that's too harsh, I actually try to correct it in the file itself. Here is how you find and correct an S in the file. You can usually tell the sibilance because it's a more solid block. So you can see here, this doesn't look as solid. This looks super solid, and let's watch. There's an S. Highlight that area. I'm gonna separate the region, and I'm gonna click gain it down. So if I could speak, that'd be awesome. Just a smidge. If I go too far, watch what happens. We get lispy, right? Just like the same way if we hit a de-esser too hard. So now if I pop the de-esser open, I'm not even catching it there. So that's the way I like to handle my sibilance. I like to get out in front of it, clean it up in the track if needed, and that way I don't need a bunch of de-essers. We do start with a de-esser, so I don't want it to do too much. I'd prefer to barely see it move. I have it set to high frequency only. I don't need everything else kind of triggering it. So next we move on, and we have kind of like a double-decker EQ sandwich here, and this is really all you need. This last plugin, which we'll get to, is really just for a little bit of kind of style and sizzle. The first EQ that we pop on is essentially to clean it up. So if we listen to the vocal, I'm going to put on and clean out some of that rumble. Too far till she sounds thin.
Your smile, time could never fade. It's kind of strange.
Now we're also getting a little bit of that proximity effect from the mic. So that's going to be somewhere between maybe 200 and 400. So I'm going to grab this 200, boost it up, and see where I find that area that's kind of annoying me. And I'm going to pull it down just a little bit. Not so much that I thin out the energy and the warmth, but just get enough of that proximity out. So watch when I boost this up.
In my imagination, the sky still swells with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other. The image of your smile, time could never fade. It's kind of strange that I can't explain, but I've got to turn the page.
Just a little cleaner. That's all we need. A little bonus tip, if you are dealing with a singer who belts and has kind of nasal register, you can get around 4K a whistle tone, something that feels really kind of harsh to our ears. So if you're ever dealing with high vocals that are very belty and feel shrilly, check your 4K. Now we are into the double-decker compressor sandwich. This is what's known as serial compression. Not like my favorite snack, cereal, but actual cereal like in tandem. So we're going to put on a fast compressor like an 1176. So I have a very fast attack, very fast release, and a 4:1 ratio. The goal of this right now is to just knock down the transients. And we're only going to want to see this move just a little bit. That's where we're going to kind of dial into.
In my imagination, the sky still swells with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other. The image of your smile, time could never.
What this does is if the vocalist doesn't have like fantastic breath and mic control, it helps just kind of level out the front, especially if they're hitting the front of the word really hard. It helps to kind of just knock it back a little bit and keep the vocal feeling a little bit more level from the front, where it's not like the top poking out and then kind of diving back into the mix. The next compressor, which is designed to be like an LA2A, is going to be very slow. And we're going to add a little bit more compression on this one. And its desired effect is to level the vocal out. Let's notice on this.
Image of your smile.
Let's take this off for a second.
The image of your smile, time could never fade.
So you have the ba 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 ba. You can hear like there's like different balance and energy. Now let's listen with this without.
The image of your smile, the image of your smile.
It stabilizes the part, smooths it out, and also brings it a little bit more forward. We now can bring up our next EQ, which is designed to kind of sweeten what we're hearing. So there, we just put a little bit of top end, lifted kind of what felt like a little bit of a blanket. Like if I'm talking right now and I'm kind of going to put my fingers in front of my mouth and then I remove it, we're hoping that we get just a little bit more kind of clarity, like a blanket's been lifted. I'm just going to roll off a little bit here just in case. Sometimes processing can put some low end back, especially when you're compressing, it can add a little bit back. Let's listen without.
The image of your smile, time could never fade. The image of your smile, time could never fade.
That vocal is rock solid, right in the center of the mix, sitting nice and present and balanced. So then the last one is our lo-fi. And that is, again, I use either the distortion or the saturation. You could also consider it like taking the place of a tape emulator. Pay attention to the area where the sibilance is, because that's where we're going to start getting some of those like upper harmonics that the distortion is creating. So it's going to start, building up as we kind of move up the frequency chain. Kind of brings a little bit of pop to the upper end of her voice, especially in the area where you get some sibilance. So let's take a listen, see if you notice what I'm noticing. Here it is off.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color.
Now, after we built that up, let's listen again to the Quicksand chain. And I'm going to take this off for a second, the doubler, which I see on a lot of stuff. And we'll listen even straight apples to apples. So here it is again.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other. In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other.
Now, this chain suits my style. Maybe you might be digging the Quicksand. The Quicksand to me sounds extremely overprocessed, sounds a little bit lispy. It just sounds a little kind of overhyped, where our chain sounds a lot more natural, smooth, and present. I would also strongly recommend not putting your effects right on the track. When you stack your reverbs and your delays right on the individual inserts, you're going to start building up mud. Also, if you do finish with something like this with a limiter or compressors at the end, you are baking everything into that signal. It's going to make EQing an absolute nightmare. As you're EQing now, you're trying to individually EQ your track, plus, the EQ is going to impact your reverbs and your effects. So the whole thing itself just becomes really messy. If you're getting a lot of work and work where you have to have a folder of deliverables, printing stems is going to be like a nightmare, especially if they want dry stems and they want and wet, or having the effects separate. I recommend creating auxiliary sends from your main vocal and working that way. I'm going to show you the actual chain that I use and how it compares to the stock one that we built. So here's the stock.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color.
Really, really close. My real plugin setup is modeled exactly philosophically the same way the stock one is, except I love the Pro DS by FabFilter. You can hit it a little bit harder before you start hearing it start to sound like Cindy Brady and get all like super lispy.
That's good.
The Pro Q. And with this,
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color.
I did a little bit, same kind of concept here, and then I actually just did a little bit of a boost on this one because I don't actually add a second EQ. You might be wondering, well, why are you telling me, dude, to do that and you're not? And that's a phenomenal question. The reason is because I pick up color from the 1176. I find that the 1176 with the blue stripe is a very bright compressor and definitely brighter than the stock Pro Tools compressors. So I pick up a little bit of kind of top end and like a little bit of that kind of like spittiness in the sibilance area from this actual compressor. So not only am I compressing, the 1176s can take on a lot of compression in a transparent way, but I'm not hitting it too hard. Let me try and level match that just a little bit closer, and you could hear the brightness that the compressor adds. So I'm going to bring it down. Let's see where we're at.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other.
Do you hear that? A little bit more present. So that's why I didn't have to add a second EQ. Next, I use the LA2A, which is a slower compressor, optical. Now, what's cool about this compressor is you can kind of get up to around 7, and you can, really kind of hear the character of that compressor. So let's push this up to 7 and then gain match and see if we like it better with even a little bit more compression.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other. The image of your smile, time could never fade.
I like this. And what it's doing is it's pushing the vocal a little bit more to the front, making it feel a little bit more intimate. And for this track, that's an awesome thing. Then here's my version of the lo-fi. I use Sound Toys Little Radiator, but there's 1,000 different saturation plugins. And I'll just audition this. Usually this will be bypassed.
In my imagination, the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other.
And that gives me, again, a little bit of brightness, a little bit of that kind of additional harmonic content at the top. And then little bonus tip here, I love, and I always have it on bypass, the filter freak. I see it as a tone box. So when you kick it on stock, it's going to sound like a little bit filtered. I open the frequency up and then I play with the resonance and I try to find like the right piece of air for the track. So here it is bypassed. And what you're going to notice is the top of the vocal isn't lifting enough yet. So you're still getting a sense of proximity to the mic and feeling like really kind of in your face. This actually steps it back just a smidge by putting a little bit of air on the top of it, but makes it feel a little bit more natural in the context of the song. So here we go again.
And the sky still swirls with color. Swimming in the clouds, we'll be dancing with each other. The image of your smile, time could never fade. It's kind of strange that I can't explain, but I've got to turn the page.
I think it makes a huge difference. It's subtle, but it's always a game of inches. Picking up 1% here, 1% here makes a huge deal as opposed to trying to put something on and be super heavy-handed. Now, some other fun things with this is you can hit the tweak, and if you want to go, like right now it's on dirt, but I usually like fat. If you had a song where you want to do something fun with the vocals, you could set this up and automate the frequency or a resonance. And it's a great extra plugin to have on that helps me remind myself, am I really setting the vocal intention for this song? Like, am I really dialing that vibe in? But again, here we are with just a handful of plugins. We have a ready-made vocal sound. Start with a de-esser, but try to pre-de-ess if you can by clip gaining down some of the sibilance so that your de-esser doesn't have to work that hard. Then use an EQ for subtractive purposes, getting out what you don't want in that vocal. And we have a fast compressor, kind of knocking down those transients, maybe a decibel or two. Then you go with a slow compressor and a little bit more compression, maybe in the ballpark of 4 to 6. You can go up if you're using something like an LA2A, maybe to 7, and that'll smooth the vocal out. From there, you can add, if you need, a sweetening EQ, and then something that kind of helps with your level of saturation. So my philosophy with setting chains is that every plugin has to have a specific role that works in harmony with the rest of the chain, not spending your time kind of using one plugin to back out of other plugins, which I feel the Quicksand chains often do. Somebody applies a plugin, they like the compression, but now something feels too harsh, so now they got to put on another EQ to kind of de-harsh, and then that feels like the vocal's a little dull, so now we got to pop on something else to brighten the vocal, but now we're hearing too much sibilance because there was some saturation, and now we're going to slap another de-esser on. And somebody told me once when I was in a band and it was a poorly recorded record, they said that they had to spend most of their time and resources repairing rather than enhancing. And that always stuck with me. When you're building chains and when you're working on mixing, you want to spend your time enhancing the audio, not really trying to repair. Please let me know what your go-to vocal chain is. And please let me know if there's been any plug-in Quicksand that you have ever fallen into, and if so, what that chain was, because I know I got plenty to share. Hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed making it. It's kind of a rainy day outside. I got my Haunted Mansion shirt on, kind of fits the mood, and I'm in here mixing and decided to take a quick break and share this with everybody. Okay, my friends, till next time, have fun mixing.